Welcome to the 48th edition of Women's Wrestling Weekly, the show. I am Kyle Klingman, joined by Scott Beck. We will go through the 2025 World Championships again just to make sure we covered all our bases. Scott, is it possible that Japan is thinking 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles, 6 for 6 Olympic gold medals? When you look at the history since they went to six, Japan has won 4 of 6 for the last three Olympic cycles. Two of those weights were monumental upsets. Is it possible that in their thinking, we're gearing up, we're resting some of our best stars to go 6 for 6 at the 2028 Olympic Games?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much they've had some of this, won at the first four weights are pretty much covered. They've had people that have, kind of won. If you think about it, you got Sasaki at 50, 53 could be Akuno or Kyuka, might be better and beat her out by then, right? 50, 57 they're gonna have Fujinami or it's maybe or Sakurai maybe, and 62 would be Mitoki or Sakurai, both Olympic champs. And then, maybe Ishii's ready. I don't know if Amit will be back or she just keeps progressing. But and then Kagami. I'd say the toughest one to me is 68, right? Because if Amit's there, she's gonna be tough to beat. But who knows where she'll be? I mean, she's out right now. I don't know how focused she'll be or if she's gonna want to come back. That to me is gonna be. But if Amit's not there or Amit isn't at previous form, it's certainly possible. That said, it's hard to have all six have an Olympic gold medal type performance. Something tends to normally happen, but certainly it's possible. What are your thoughts?
I think they're thinking that right now. I think they're preparing in that way that we want to go 6 for 6 because it's never been done before. And if any team can do it, it can be Japan. And like we said, you have 2016, Helen pulls off the upsets of upsets in the Olympic finals. You have this last Olympic cycle, Yui Sasaki goes down in the quarterfinals and she's out. She ends up getting a bronze in one of the strangest situations ever, how it transpires. And then India doesn't make weight, and then Cuba ends up getting to the silver medal match. So one of the strangest brackets ever. So you could potentially have 5 for 5. Although I will say I think it was Sarah's time. I think Sarah was going to win that year. But you're looking at potentially 5 for 6 there. Like you said, they shored up. Their most difficult weight class has always been 76. So we don't know if Amit's going to move up. I think she would, but I think it's possible based on what we've just seen at the 2025 Worlds.
Yeah, I mean 76. Yeah, yeah. I mean it's possible, but I mean, look. Well, I forget the year, Kyle. You can tell me the year Russia won 6 or 7 golds, men. What was that? What year was
2007.
that?
Yeah, 2007. They won
Seven.
6 for 7.
And the only guy that didn't win is a former world champion, Farniev. So I mean, it's even if you have somebody capable of it, actually having everyone do it is very difficult, obviously. And it's interesting. It's good. I'm not giving them that one yet.
No,
It's
no,
just very
we shouldn't.
challenging, but it's an interesting concept, and the idea that they're more solid at 76 than 68 is a little interesting. I listen. Do I think whether it's a meet, Welker, or for some reason, somehow Blades went up? I don't know. Do I think that those three are capable of beating Kagami? Absolutely, but Kagami's pretty good. She's only going to get better.
Final thoughts on 2025 Worlds. It won't be the final thoughts because we'll be talking about it at some point. It's never our final thoughts. But just thinking about what transpired for the United States, for Japan, we talked about it last time. Japan, you can't overstate how good they are, given that they had some of the reserves come in and do so well, and they still dominate. They have 5 of the 10 gold medals, 6 medals total, 2 additional medal matches. So you have 2 out of the medal matches. Really unbelievable to say that. United States in a transition year, but when you talk about actual performance, getting it done and not just saying we can be there and here's the things we need to do, Japan time and time again, they get the job done.
And a good example of that to me is Uchida. Uchida, who at 57 does a medal in Junior Worlds, and then at 55 takes a bronze medal. And we thought she was injured. She didn't wrestle on a medal match in Junior. So that just shows you the caliber. And I would argue she was, one of the worst ones on the team on paper, right? With not really senior accolades. So if that's what they can do with if somebody who was injured a couple of weeks before that, disappointed in medal, and comes back, drops away, comes back and takes a bronze medal. that's just an example. And you look at 50. I mean, we've said this many times. They're literally. I mean, Yoshimoto doesn't even medal, and she's a world champion, and they're literally four deep in that weight class, 4 or 5 deep, really. So it's. I mean, at 53, what do you? I mean, Yavakuna comes back, wins her fourth world title. Who she beat out Makeda, who's an Olympic or multiple world champion, and then you have um Kyuka, his brother, was an Olympic champion, lost in the finals of the Worlds. And Kyuka's like in theory at 53 is was a 55 kilo world champ who most would have thought with Fujinami going up is the heir apparent to own that weight class. So it's pretty crazy stuff, just the depth and their bench. But it's you got to perform at these terms. It's getting six. That would just be insane.
Looking ahead to the 2028 Olympics for the United States, do you think there's anyone that we're not thinking of that might be in high school, like Terry Steiner said, maybe the next great wrestler, someone we've never heard of? Do you think anyone's going to surprise us by 2028? I don't see anyone on the radar right now that we don't know about already, but I think that the the performers that we've seen, I think a lot of them will be in the fold by the time 2028 comes around. But you don't know if Haley Aguero is going to want to come back, Don Parrish is going to want to come back. There's just some different superstars that you don't know that will come around. But do you think there's anyone that will play a factor in 2028?
Well, is Fernandez able to compete in 28?
I think she will be able to.
You're
Yes,
young.
she will be able to, I think, by that point. I think she'll be 18.
Okay, so clearly she's somebody to be watching, right? I mean, but we talk about her all the time. So there's no, I don't think there's anybody on the cusp of that we haven't talked about or that we don't know. But you never know. Somebody could just, rise up. But it's so difficult. I mean, other than these quote, prodigies, and again, we hate putting that on somebody, but like somebody with the accolades and somebody who's wrestled singers a lot, like Fernandez has competed very well against very good singers. Um, it's just tough to jump in for most. Even if you're ultimately going to improve and be senior world team member type material, you're wrestling women, in many cases, and it's tough. So it's a big adjustment process. I mean, it can take years. So with somebody that we haven't looked at, just all of a sudden just rise like a supernova, I don't know, but I made my words. I don't know. I think we kind of have had eyes on the the people we've talked about as singers or rising prodigy class, very talented people. I don't think any of it's going to come out that we haven't at least talked about.
Scott, I have a gripe, and I don't
Yeah.
think it's a gripe that's actively being pursued, but I think it's a passive gripe, and that is the concept of era shaming, where people say, look at how well these women are doing right now, and look at the past and how much it's evolved, and how much, if you put them in the time capsule, you go back and how much they would throttle that era. Not a fan of it. And I don't know if people are actively doing that, saying, oh my gosh, we're doing this on purpose, but I think it passively happens. And I think the time machine only works if you go both ways. And if you look at baseball as an
Exactly.
example, I mean, if you go back and watch Ken Burns' baseball, there was a time where they didn't like curveballs and they said, you can't do it. And they tried to outlaw the curveball. Now you have all these pitches and everything's so good and the pitching is world class and these guys can't hit it right now. I think that is a tangible thing. Even if you look at speed and swimming, those are things where you can quantify it. Wrestling isn't as quantifiable. You have to look at the technique and say, wow, we have come a long way, which we have just by evidence of a lot of these high school girls going to college opens and dominating and doing so well. I think that you have to look at the progress that happens. I think we don't take enough into consideration of there were dual roles when a lot of these women's pioneers were breaking through that they had to bear a lot of the criticism and a lot of hatred. So if you go in the time machine and you say we're going to take them back and they're going to wrestle them, you also have to go back and say you're going to have to deal with a lot of these different things too. So I think the time machine comparison a lot of times isn't fair.
Well, I think it's got to work. It's many ways. Like you talk about baseball as an analogy. Well, the pitchers in baseball, the starting pitchers threw 9 innings most of the time, or 8 innings, unless they got chilled. Now these guys throw 5 or 6 innings, so they don't. You know, it's like the way the game is played has changed, and the rules and around. But you also have to do the time machine, not just saying take take the ones now back and make them work the jobs or not have the same partners and see what it's like to not have that kind of education. What if you took the ones back and leaped them forward and they had the same nutrition, coaching partners, and could focus on it as well? So, it's like, yeah, I could watch some high level men's wrestling matches from a long time ago in the 70s. It looks like junior high school with like rolling on everybody's back and everything. But if they were training now, they wouldn't do that, and they'd be coached differently. So I don't think it's a valid comparison at all. I mean, would the one now, if you just warped them against that exact version, beat them in many cases? Yes, but things evolve. But maybe if you gave the ones back the nutrition and training, they beat the other ones up. So I think it's they were the best of their era under the rules slash situational existence that they had. So it's very tough to do those comparisons, and people do them. And kind of, I don't want to say it's a waste of time because it's fun and it makes you. It does have a benefit because it makes you go back and look at the athletes from different eras and learn the history of the sport and have respect for some of their achievements. But I don't think it necessarily proves anything.
It doesn't necessarily prove anything. It's going to happen because we want to compare and we want to say, how would this person do against another person? But I think you don't want to remember the rule sets. You apply all of the rule sets that are happening now. And when you go back and you think of the ball draw era, and it was 1 point takedowns and it was 3 points feet to back, there were just a lot of different things, hand to hand exposure on gut wrenches or leg laces at the time. There were just a lot of different rule sets. Weigh-in procedures were different. So you aren't taking into consideration all the evolution that has taken place in order for things to happen. And so when you do go back, you have to say, wow, what were they dealing with? Hey, I've watched some of those 1950s wrestling matches from the NCAA finals. You're right. It looks less than junior high because they're standing straight up. They don't wrestle close stance. I would imagine if someone came in and hit a low single, the referees wouldn't even know what to do, and they'd probably call it illegal just because it would just be so foreign at the time. Like, what are you doing? You can't do that. You're supposed to stand straight up. So there's just so many things to consider as you move along. There's just these little incremental things that happen. But I think that's the interesting thing with women's wrestling right now. It's evolving so fast that your mind can't keep up with it because they are getting the good training so early as 12, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds. And that's why you're seeing a Taina Fernandez, Jacqueline Mazakas, Amit Elor, on and on and
Morgan
on.
Turner,
Morgan
yeah. I
Turner,
mean,
yeah, just they're coming in and I mean, even Audrey Jimenez, who wins the U.S. Open as a teenager, wins a state championship in the boys' side her senior season. So a lot of these things are happening and the process has been expedited. But to go back and to think of the early pioneers, there were 100 women out for wrestling when it first came on the scene, just nationally. And some of these women said, I never even knew there was another woman that existed that wrestled besides me. So I think we have to really respect that pioneering era and what they did to get us to this point. I don't think we do that enough.
yeah, and we've heard it from some of the women that they just being in a room that felt antagonistic and where you weren't necessarily welcome in many cases is that's just very difficult to train in that environment. In a hostile, unwelcoming environment, and many did it. And that's not to say that even back then there weren't certain situations where they probably felt welcome, but I think it was more common than not that they weren't necessarily welcome.
Let's take Helen Maroulis as an example of what we're talking about here. Helen made her first world team in 2008 at the age of 17, and now she just turned 34 and won a world title. What is it that makes Helen Maroulis so good? I wonder how she does. I think she is a wrestling genius. I think when you hear her talk and the way she analyzes things, it's different than any other wrestler that I've heard talk about wrestling. What is it about Helen that's allowed her to evolve and continue to make her technique and make the adaptations to be a world champion again at age 33?
I mean, I think in Helen's case, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to listen to her speak about wrestling, like one-on-one situation a couple times, and and know her, through my daughter. And I think in her case, obviously she's very competitive and doesn't like to lose. That's a given. But she loves wrestling and she's a perfectionist and she's a student of the sport. So if you ever get to see Helen in a room, she's working on things, she's pulling people over, she's asking people things. If she doesn't like the way something feels, she'll just say, and trust me, if you saw her do that, you think it looked pretty damn good. She'd say, I just don't understand this. I'm not getting it right. What am I missing in the field? Like she's always tinkering, asking, working on positions, and just have an understanding of it. She just has a high level wrestling mind, perfectionist. Obviously, she's had the benefit, throughout her life of, very good coaching with Coach Kalika, Terry Steiner. I mean, she's been around everybody. She also, the other thing Helen's done, and Mikhail's done this with her in Greece, um and she's done other places, is she's willing to take her opponents. Like they trained with Makita once, they trained with Previla Rocky, I think maybe it was Kawhi once, but like Helen will seek them out. She's trained with Sasaki in the US. I mean, she'll find the people and invite them or go there and or meet somewhere in the middle and train with them for a week. So she's had she's willing to, and then what she does is she understands wrestling. She sees what they do and what she does and what works and what doesn't. Just a very high level understand the sport, a very open mind, I think.
I think what we've done with Helen is we look at the totality of her career and we say the Olympic gold medal, the historic upset over Yoshida, two bronze medals, five world and Olympic gold medals, and we just look at this total of how many world and Olympic teams she's made, and we forget maybe the path that she took to get there. There's still the concussions that she had in 2019 where it didn't look like she was going to come back. And you wonder how she can continue to do this. And yet in 2025, we're saying she's the best she's looked since 2017. This is staggering. Like, this just doesn't happen that often. I think in the history of wrestling where
Yeah,
somebody's been able to do this, Chris Campbell would be the only comparison who won an Olympic bronze medal at the age of 37. But what Helen is doing and that we are witnessing, this is groundbreaking.
very seldom will I say this, but I'm at a loss for words.
Do you think she's going to continue if we had to look into 2020? I know that you said year by year, and that's the way she should take this, but is Helen LA 2028, age 37, is that in the cards? And can she contend with the best of the best at 57 kilos still?
Number one, I don't know, and I would say Helen probably doesn't know. I think as long as she's healthy and it doesn't have other interests that take her away at any moment, Helen, something else could pull her away if she decides she's not feeling as good, healthy maybe, or just something else interests her. But who knows? I mean, I think it's up to Helen, clearly, and also in any sport, at some point, father time is undefeated, and different people that are really, really good, maybe it can take longer, but at some point, Father Time's undefeated. Who knows when it is? Could it, all of a sudden, is it possible that she stopped dropping in talent and the age hits her at, 36? Yeah, it's possible. I don't know, but she looked pretty damn good this year. So I think as long as Helen is that Helen, you'll see her until you don't. It's really hard to tell. I mean, could we see her in 32 is the better question, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking that far ahead, but we've
I
talked.
mean, think about he was done a number of times. Emilian Lopez from Cuba, Greco-Roman legend, 5 Olympic gold medals, and he's taken years off, and he said he's done, and then all of a sudden he probably scraps in the rooms, beats the other guy who's like a world, champion, the other Cuban, and says, "All right, let's do it." Who knows? I think Greco is easier to wrestle in older age. Well, maybe not. I don't know. But who knows?
We've talked about levels, and our levels is 0 to 100, and 100 is that expert level. I don't think there's any question that Helen Maroulis has reached that 100 level and has stayed there consistently. Even if she gets a bronze medal, I just think her intellect and the way she thinks is 100 level. What I think is fun is the prospect of a couple of 100 levels going against each other. And so my mind always,
Fujinami against
yeah,
Helen.
yeah, Fujinami against Helen, and what does that look like, and
Oof.
moving up in weight and adapting to that. I
Oh,
think it's the opportunity for a super match. I would just love for that to happen at some point.
I would love to see that, Matt. Fujinami is really, 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 really good. And she's young and she's relentless. Now, Helen is very savvy and very positionally aware and is great at studying opponents. Could she slow her down would be the issue. I'd love to see that match. Somebody should do that match. And it shouldn't have to be at the Olympics. It should be before then. It should be like now. Helen's wrestling in the pro league against Samantha Stewart. This pro, what's it called? What are the initials?
RAF, Real American Freestyle.
Yeah. So Snyder bowed out. I don't know any of the nuances. Evidently, Helen's wrestling Samantha Stewart from Canada, who's a one-time world bronze medalist at 53, I think. Why didn't they go and get Fujinami? Like, that's the match.
When we look forward to what's going to happen for the next Olympic cycle, I just think that the NCAA sanctioning women's wrestling, now that there's going to be a hyper awareness on the Olympic movement a little bit more, how much education needs to happen for wrestling fans to understand what is happening here for NCAA Women's Championship Wrestling? Do they know it's freestyle? Do they know that there is a different cadence and a different style that's going to take place for women? I don't know how much wrestling fans know about this, but I think the NCAA designation is going to make people pay attention in a different way than normal.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of differences in knowledge about this. I think that the high school coaches that are very involved in wrestling, like, aren't just doing this to get an extra paycheck a few hours a week because the district wanted to start women's wrestling or a neighboring team did and their team did. I think the ones that really, take their athletes to USA wrestling tournaments, anybody that's really involved in the sport, listens to podcasts like this or FloWrestling or reads themat.com. I mean, I think we have been, when I say we, I don't mean me and you. I mean, we, the wrestling community, has kind of been trying to scream from the rooftops and, explain the landscape. There's a lot of articles about the mat.com's done a, very good job. I think it really has to do with the level of involvement with, USA wrestling and the national and regional tournaments. And that's up to the state directors. I think if you're a state director, of USA Wrestling, you need to make sure that the coaches within the state, especially, some of the states only wrestle folk style, but if you have freestyle tournaments, there's qualifiers for Fargo, right? We're now sending athletes from almost every state, if not every state, to Fargo. So I think it's those state directors need to make sure that the high school coaches, or the freestyle coaches for the national teams at Fargo are educating the high school coaches to educate the athletes and the families.
And as toxic as social media can get, I think it's up to some of the commenters to make sure when there are clips posted and people are confused saying, how could you win 4-4 or 5-5? That there's commenters saying this is freestyle, so that there's an education process there too. Because I've seen that happen where even past men's All-Americans are crying out and saying that's not how you score that, thinking it's folk style when it's actually freestyle, and then he deletes his comment because he's embarrassed. But I think commenters have a responsibility at this point to be the educators in this so that people know that it's women's freestyle going forward.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't have the problem because I don't have social media, so I've never seen that. But yes, if people do that and you post, you should, follow up on comments and do some education as well. I think I think people are educating. I mean, it may not happen as quickly as we want. There may be some, one-offs where people don't know, but I think the word's getting out there. And I think another step which would make it better is, at some point, New York State was the first one that, sanctioned freestyle, which is why, by the way, you and I talked about with the pin rankings, why those matches get into the freestyle pins and sometimes overinflate them with wins is because New York has freestyle sanction. But I think at some point these other states need to, wake up and get rid of folk style for women in high school and junior high school or whatever.
I think it's a no-brainer at this point. I would love to hear the argument for someone to keep women's folk style at the high school level because you are going to a completely different sport when you get to college. So I don't know in theory why that wouldn't trickle down and why there wouldn't be change made freestyle.
It should happen. I mean, the argument against, I believe in some cases, is some of the coaches, we need to get coaches, and some of the coaches are not that familiar with freestyle. and then referees as well can be an issue, or just laziness. But the ref, any ref that most of the refs. If you don't know freestyle, you've never been around the sport, you don't know the sport that well, then you're probably not the greatest ref in the world. If you don't love the sport enough to know freestyle, in my opinion, because they just started out as women's refs of folk style. They were probably men's folk style refs, and I'd like to believe the top coaches as well have shown enough interest in the sport to understand freestyle. So I think it's a lame excuse, but I have heard that.
You're also seeing a trend where the high level girls who want to move on and get to the college level are pursuing that world and Olympic dream, saying, I'm not going to wrestle the high school season. I might be homeschooled and I'm going to focus full time on freestyle because winning that state championship doesn't mean as much to me as making a world or Olympic team. Maybe it's the age level. I know world Olympic team's a big goal, but you're just seeing some girls talk about that I'm not so sure I want to go on the high school path. You have to be pretty high level to do that. I still love the state tournament concept. I'm not saying you should abandon that because I think it's so good to be a part of that team environment. But I think some of these girls are asking questions. I want to go my own direction.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, in our situation, we didn't really have much of a choice because there wasn't really a girls teams in New York City that were good, So we did a kind of a one-on-one learning school thing, and also the traveling when you're competing. You're going to Lady Clip-On, you're going to Germany, Madrid. If you're competing in these tournaments as a senior, so as a high school senior, some of these senior level tournaments or junior ones abroad, you're missing so much school. But I think if you happen to be, let's just say, like the Macalusos, where you're in Minisink Valley, which is where PJ Duke is, where you have a good tradition, a good infrastructure, and good coaching up there, good, teams and good partners. It's less necessary. I think it's so. I think it really depends on what your local situation is too. If you have the support system to get good training, good partners, and good coaching.
One thing, a nuance that we've discussed on freestyle that I think probably freestyle people follow it is a 4 point move is really worth 4.5 points during a match. And the reason that is and why that's so big to be able to score 4 point moves is because it gives you criteria and really puts you ahead of the game. Because if someone scores 2 and 2, you're going to have to get a step out, you have to go a step further. The action of getting one move worth 4 points when you have to potentially score three more times in order to equal that 4 point move and drilling that and getting those moves and thinking that's big for freestyle wrestling. I think it's a great strategy to be thinking about feet to back a lot.
And that's a good part of the rule set. That's the first criteria, right? Is the biggest move. Because it incentivizes you to be aggressive because you get a good reward for it, right? So you're sitting there with a 4.5, four, as you say, 4.5 point move. The only negative, sometimes somebody gets an early 4, then they try to sit in a lead. Like you saw in Macy's lost to Casabieva. Casabieva hits that 4 and then kind of tries to shut it down. The Macy's clawing back, just didn't have enough time to overcome it. But maybe Casabieva would have opened up more if she didn't have the 4 right away and just shut down. It works both ways, but the rule set makes it very valuable, which I like. I like anything that incentivizes action.
Scott, let's end with this. Reese Larramendy, who has been on this show twice to break things down, she is going to be on the play-by-play with David Bray at Who's Number One Saturday, October 11th. Super happy she gets this opportunity. She's so good. She's knowledgeable. She's the right person to carry this forward. I love that she gets this breakthrough moment. So happy that she'll be on Who's Number One. I hope everyone will watch and support her in that Who's Number One Saturday, October 11th.
Yeah, that's great. This is the first I'm hearing of it. But Reese was great with us, and she put the work in. She prepared, and she's going to do great. That's really good to hear. I'm looking forward to watching the Who's Number One event and hearing her.